This program is made possible in part thanks to generous donations from viewers like you.
Hello, welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show, and thanks for joining me. In this episode, the Sarasota GOP. It's not your father's Oldsmobile. A party torn between traditional conservative values and radical populists. A Gulf Coast destination for convicted Trump loyalists and the alt-right media. And how we became the new frontier for a grand old party and the cast of local characters who rode the big lie wave to fame and fortune. The story begins on August 26, 2012. The night before the Republican National Convention in Tampa. Hurricane Isaac is threatening the Florida Gulf Coast. Moderate Romney Republicans are keeping an eye on the weather reports. And history is being made in Sarasota at the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom. Then citizen Donald Trump is presented with his first of two Statesman of the Year awards by the Sarasota Republican Party.
When I got off the plane today, if I were wearing a rug, as they said I do, I'd be standing up here right now with nothing on the head, believe me. Because it was windy and miserable and raining, and I was soaking wet.
It made national headlines, mostly in the form of sarcastic commentary. The city was laughed at, the award was panned as a joke, and Trump relished the attention. GOP Chair Joe Gruters played a leading role. He parlayed the statesman presentation onto the Trump campaign and rode the gravy train all the way to the top of the state party. A pivotal shift had occurred. And then came January 6th. Sarasota Republicans were there. They answered the defeated president's call to action. Terrorist groups from Florida like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were there and played a part in the insurrection. Gruters was active. He recruited people to go to Washington. We wanted to hear his story, but he has declined numerous invitations to be on the show. Christian Ziegler was there on January 6th. He says he left after Trump's speech and before the violence began. Christian's loyalty to Trump runs deep. According to a report in the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, he runs a media company that was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars from political action committees tied to the twice-impeached former president. Ziegler neither confirmed or denied this, saying, "From what I remember, they misreported it in that article." 6 months after the attack, Sarasota Republicans welcomed Trump for, of all things, an Independence Day rally.
Now, we're thrilled to be joined tonight by many outstanding Republican leaders. Vice Chair of the Florida GOP, Christian Ziegler. Christian, thank you. Great job. Great job on the election.
There is also a Sarasota connection to members of Trump's big lie inner circle. General Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon, Rumble, a digital video platform on Longboat Key, and the infamous cyber ninja election auditors. To provide details on that part of the story and more, we turn to Zach Anderson. He's a reporter for the Sarasota Herald-Tribune who has been following these stories from the beginning. Two local guys, Joe Gruters and Christian Ziegler, rose to state party leadership positions on Trump's coattails. What's the backstory of that?
You know, Joe Gruters especially, he was very out front in seeing the momentum that Trump was getting within the GOP. Even before Trump ran for president, Joe had him here in Sarasota. Joe was the chair of the Sarasota GOP. He still is, but Jack Brill is the acting chair right now while Joe runs the Republican Party of Florida. And before Trump was really, I mean, he had talked about politics and, was kind of, hinting that he might run at some point. But really early on, Joe had him come down to Sarasota and gave him this award that they give, the Statesman of the Year award. And, it seemed to develop kind of a relationship with him early on. And when Trump announced that he was running for president in the 2016 cycle, Joe became his co-chair of his Florida campaign and kind of hitched his wagon to Trump. And as we've seen, obviously he's come to dominate the Republican Party and really reshape the Republican Party. And you had some Sarasota people who were kind of in on the ground floor with his campaign here in Florida.
Sure. Ziegler was also in Washington on January 6th. Gruters invited people to attend. What do we know about the GOP connection to the big lie rally of January 6th?
So you had some people like Gruters and Ziegler who were sort of tangentially involved in the run-up to January 6th, but then you had people from this area who actually did storm the Capitol and were inside and were charged with crimes related to that. You had two Oath Keepers from Sarasota County. The Oath Keepers are sort of a right-wing militia extremist group, and you had a large number of them from Florida who are facing seditious conspiracy charges. And there was a kind of an Oath Keepers cell in Florida that included a number of Sarasota County residents. You had Proud Boys, another right-wing extremist group, including one, I believe, from Bradenton, who was charged with crimes related to January 6th. Florida had more people charged with crimes related to January 6th than any other state.
And also then there's the Cyber Ninja Sarasota, the company hired to audit elections to support the big lie.
Yeah, it's interesting to have this company, this small Sarasota company that really nobody had ever heard about before the 2020 election.
Right.
And they were hired to go to Arizona and do this audit that was, a partisan audit. They were hired by Republicans in the state Senate to go out there and review the ballots based entirely on these accusations about unfounded accusations about voter fraud.
There's a long list of these senior Trump officials with Sarasota County addresses. So where Steve Bannon, Michael Flynn, et al.
You really saw Sarasota become kind of a magnet for some of these people who were involved in pushing some of these election fraud claims. Some of the most prominent people in the country, specifically Michael Flynn, he ended up getting a pardon from Trump because he was convicted of lying to the FBI. And then shortly after that, wound up down here in the Englewood area. He brought others, Patrick Byrne,
right,
who is a wealthy tech company founder, founded Overstock.com, and also got very involved in some of this election fraud issues. And he ended up following Michael Flynn down here and buying a home. Some of the most prominent individuals who were trying to overturn the election results ended up here.
Yeah, and the Rumble Commission story.
Yeah, and that's another fascinating thing. You had this tech company that is kind of a right-wing alternative to YouTube, who that has put their headquarters on Longboat Key, which is really interesting. Rumble is a platform that conservatives have used that is kind of really pushing the idea that we're not going to censor or
right,
moderate some of this speech that some of the other tech companies have. And so they've become kind of the preferred platform for video content in particular. They moved to Longboat Key, and then there was this whole controversy over whether or not they should get public incentives and questions about whether people even really knew where the incentives were going. So, but it sort of just adds to the narrative that there is sort of a center of gravity in Sarasota where you have a lot of these prominent far right, or just conservative individuals and conservative other media types and media companies who are moving here. And the region also, in a lot of ways, sort of represents sort of the changing face of the Republican Party. We talked about Joe Gruters and how he was kind of prescient about where the party was going and got in on the Trump campaign on the ground floor. And I think that there was people here who were seeing the changing party that was moving away from sort of the Jeb Bush type Republicans, the old guard establishment Republicans, toward this new, more combative, more aggressive Republican Party that has become dominated by Trump. And in a lot of ways, Sarasota represents that. Sarasota County used to have a number of more moderate Republicans, really. You had Republicans who would vote against anti-abortion legislation. You had Republicans who were skeptical of some of the school choice measures pushed by Jeb Bush and others. Republicans who were skeptical of gun rights, or pushing too far with gun rights, and who have supported modest gun control measures. So this region, I think. I think some of this is just coincidence. Some people moved here, and it doesn't have any relation to it. But I think there is a sort of a sense that this region is sort of a good example of how the Republican Party has changed, and maybe some people who have moved here kind of sense that and have accelerated it.
Thank you, Zach, for providing a factual journalist perspective. It is quite a story. Next, we go straight to the source, GOP leadership. Here in Sarasota, if you want to understand the old guard and the genteel, bipartisan way it used to be, look no further than the venerable Longboat Key Republican Club.
Conservatism, whether it be a Democrat or Republican, is okay. I think two parties can coexist quite well with one another, as long as we don't have extremists in both parties, okay? And I look at the Republican Party as less government, less taxes, and less manipulation into the day-to-day operations of business, et cetera. And that's where my values aligned. When you looked at Reagan, what he did, he and Tip O'Neill met almost every week when he was at the White House. He didn't drink, Tip did. And they would discuss a lot of things, and then they always came to a common ground. And I don't understand why we can't do that again. I mean, we become polarized, and because being polarized, we become isolated from one another.
And we also have rhino and dino. Those words are going around. And if you're identified as a Republican in name only, you are vilified all over the place right now. So the litmus test right now, anyway, for a so-called real Republican versus a rhino, is one whether someone believes the election was rigged.
Well, was it rigged? I think we can look at all past elections and say there were people who voted who shouldn't have voted. There were ballot stuffing and ballot harvesting that took place. Whether it, you look at what's happened in Wisconsin, they've, found a lot of things that have come about. Same thing happened in Arizona, and now we find out in Pennsylvania and in other states, Texas as well.
So do you think, did Trump win the election?
I can tell you my own personal viewpoint.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, did he win the election? Trump lost the election on his own, okay? And I think a lot of voter fraud helped push it in the other direction, whereby he didn't win, all right? If he would have stopped some of the tweeting and some of the comments that he made and everything else, he was his own worst enemy in the last few months.
What about all the significant people that are testifying at the Jan 6 hearing that are saying there was no, and these are hardcore Republicans who voted for Trump?
So would it have changed the election? I don't know. I've not gotten into the statistics of it or anything else, but you know, in certain states it may have had an impact. Would it have changed the election? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. The polarization of the GOP in Sarasota County, does it exist? What are your thoughts on that?
Some people tried to express themselves, and I have to be honest with you, I cut them off at a meeting.
That's interesting. How do you do that? What do you say to them?
Take the mic away from them. Very simple. I'm not into that. Mm-hmm. All right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think most of the people out there who are members of the Republican Club of Longboat Key are that way either.
On one hand, from what you've been talking about, we have a lot of well-educated people, conservative people, successful, that are in the Republican Party, moderate conservative values. On the other hand, what we're seeing now is Proud Boys, Michael Flynn, Moms for Liberty, those people that stormed the Capitol. How do you reconcile that?
Listen, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I'm not going to pass a judgment on it. I mean, we have the right to a peaceful assembly. It's guaranteed in our Constitution. And those people who did not exercise that right of peaceful assembly should be prosecuted. This is the problem, I think, with the United States today. In other words, we become polarized, and we have to stop being that way.
I respect Joe's call for moderation and an end to the polarized hate and anger that is dividing this country. But it's a bit of a cop-out to say you can't judge what happened on January 6th because you weren't there. To better understand the impact of the party's shift to the right, we turn to a prominent former Republican for perspective and context. You used to be a Republican. Tell us when and why you left the party, or did the party leave you?
Well, I think the party left me long before I left the Republican Party. But specifically, I left the party in 2018. It made national and state news. Walk back 20 years, I was very involved in the Republican Party when I first moved to town. And Tram Hudson was the head of the party at that time, and he's just a wonderful man. And I did a lot of things. I spoke on behalf of Bush. I worked and ran Jeb Bush and George Bush's campaigns, was with George Bush on 9/11. I was also involved in doing the referendums that we had beginning in 2002, and that's where the rub started, because the Republicans didn't like the referendum. So after the election of 2010, the referendum in 2010, I decided to run for school board because I found out that Kathy Kleinlein was stepping down.
That's right.
And had no idea of running for school board at all. No wish to run. But I did know a bit about the school board, having served in those campaigns, and I loved working with the school staff and so forth. And I called Joe Gruters and said, I'm going to run. And he said, oh, really? Well, in that time, there was no involvement in primaries at all for the Republican Party. They did not endorse any candidate. They never really were very tepid on school board races anyway. And so that was his answer. He then called some people that were in Northport and other parts of the same district and said, why don't you run against Jane? Those people then called me, and I was like, why are you doing this, Joe? So I called him and asked him, well, you know, this person just said they might like to run at one point, so it was kind of a shuffle to buffalo. And so that's how it started. Right. So I kind of got the opinion at that point that, you know, I wasn't very well liked. But when I got on the school board, and I did win that election, and when I got on the school board, it's nonpartisan.
That's right.
So I didn't really feel that I needed to be on the executive committee or involved in any of the clubs at all, so that's when I stopped that active involvement in the Republican Party.
You're chair of the school board right now.
Yes.
As you say, you know, it used to be relatively civil. The meetings, nothing much happened. It didn't take on the rancor that it does today. I was just going to say that Bridget Ziegler co-founded Moms for Liberty, which, from what you're saying, has grown into almost an alt-right group to disrupt school board meetings, or is that too strong a statement?
Well, I think it is a correct statement.
Okay.
Last night we had a board meeting on Longboat Key because our boardroom is being renovated. And there were people not as many people in the audience. I was happy for that, but there were several people from that organization and some others that got up and made points about our agenda items, and then she pulled 6 items from the consent agenda, the second time in a row she's done that, for no good reason. I had staff calling me saying, what is this? Why doesn't she trust that we've vetted this, that we know that our data is safe, that we know that we have a good contract in place? But she couldn't answer those points. So it's all a political theater. And that's what we have. Every time we have a board meeting now is political theater. I might add that many of these new Moms for Liberty and Moms for America folks don't have children in public schools, and that bothers me. Children in private schools, children that are homeschooled.
Okay, and so I want to kind of wrap this up as to how everything you've said relates to your issues with the Republican Party. We recently saw, obviously, an unprecedented number of restrictive education bills, you name it. You know, Don't Say Gay, Governor DeSantis with Miss Ziegler by his side, Don't Say Gay, Don't Talk About Race, ban books. Interesting now that Juneteenth is a national holiday. Do the children in our schools know why we have Juneteenth? I just put that in. But this isn't the Sarasota that I knew when I came here. It doesn't seem to be a hateful community. So what do you think is driving this?
I just think that there are so many things now that are coming out in the congressional hearings. And I've read most of the books, so I'm well ahead of having heard that for the first time. But we need to do something. There need to be consequences for actions. And we had, 3 buses from here that went up? Right. Some of these people that come to our board meetings went to the insurrection. Sure. So it's great. It's a great concern to me. But it's not the same party that it was. It's not the same party of William F. Buckley and some of the people that I do admire. And where am I? I'm much more of a centrist. I've always been a centrist. And I really care about kids.
The last word goes to a political scientist, an academic, and a friend of this show, New College's Professor Frank Alcock. Last time we talked was right before the presidential election. You were quite concerned and accurately questioned whether Trump would indeed accept defeat. Well, your predictions came true.
I wasn't sure how the election would turn out, so I wasn't 100% sure that he would lose the election, but I was very concerned that if he lost, that he would not accept an electoral loss, and where that would take us as a country, that refusal. And it turns out that he lost and refused to accept that loss. And so it took us to a very dark place in ways that might not have been apparent in the lead up to January 6th, and then it took us to January 6th. And unfortunately, that was not really a wake-up call for the entire country. And so we're still in a pretty dark place.
Give us a political science lesson. I grew up when Republicans mostly came from the professional business class, the button-down suit. Democrats were working class. So we've gone from the old guys in tweeded coats, smoking a pipe, reading for the Financial Times or voting for Eisenhower, to angry racists that are filling up our Capitol in combat gear, blaming immigrants. How did this all happen?
This is as much a history discussion as it is a political science. One, there's some threads that we might work through. One of them is notions of populism or defending the common man against the powerful elites that run systems at the expense of commoners. That's been a current of politics everywhere pretty much forever. And it ebbs and flows in terms of the intensity of these waves of populism. I think most people historically associate populist candidates sometimes with the left, the working class. But it's a bit more complicated of a picture. There have been elements of populism across the political spectrum, and they bubble up at certain times. We are in the midst of a pretty virulent global strain of populism that's manifesting in some strange ways, but it has been embraced by the Republican Party, and it's taken us to a place where a lot of long-held values of the Republican Party are being discarded or overrun or interpreted in some very strange ways in order to push an agenda. So some of the issues that are firing up Republicans have fired them up for a while, but this undercurrent of populism coupled with, I think, a very important change in how we get our information and modern technology systems and social media, which is not, during the 20th century, mass communication, it could be controlled by certain forces, but it's just a vessel. Now, all the algorithms and everything that you use, they figure you out pretty quickly and take you down some rabbit holes. And so we've got a lot of people down a lot of rabbit holes, very, very angry at a number of things. And so where the base is, I think, in the Republican Party, it's a strange place. It's not Reagan's party anymore, let's just call it.
Yeah. People use other names, but it's not Reagan's party. Even Richard Nixon stepped down. There's been a lot of comparisons all over media, mainstream media and social media, about the comparison between Watergate and this.
There's a big change. We're living in a different time. For as long as I can remember and what I remembered historically, there was a sense of respect, I think, for the rules, the institutions, the structure. Honor, I think, was a value not specific to Republicans. It's a broad American value, but it's something that I think a lot of Republicans took seriously. And so while people breaking rules, scandals, and lying have always been part of American politics, they're not, part of any particular party. I think the elders or the elites within a party, when something was exposed, would step forward and put pressure on other people to do the honorable thing. Those days are gone. And I think, fidelity to a set of values, including honor, doesn't matter so much as fidelity to a particular person. Loyalty matters more than anything. And so the people that have played the role in the past, sanctioning folks within their own party for the good of the whole, are simply being shouted down by the base and the masses. And so we've entered a place where not only disrespect, but desecration of rules and elements of the Constitution, hostility to enemies it's been the currency right now. And people and politicians are rewarded for channeling that rather than doing the honorable thing and telling people the truth. I think in another era, this select committee on January 6th, the testimony would be riveting for the entire country.
Exactly, yeah.
And it would have some devastating consequences. It would be a reckoning for the nation. And we have half of the country tuning in and basically nodding their heads about what they kind of already suspected, and the other half simply writing it off.
Okay, Frank, your last words. What would you say to sum up what's going on right now and your take on it?
If we can just take a step back and realize the peril that we're in, where this is leading is a really, really dark place where it's not going to be good for anybody. We're not talking about a place where there's going to be winners and losers. There's just going to be a lot of losers, and we really need to walk back from the precipice as a country and figure out a way that we can, again, trust some referees. We might not all agree on everything, but in an ugly battle with no referees, you just won't like what happens.
Great analogy, Frank. When there are no referees, there are no rules. Whatever your party affiliation, or none, we need to play by the rule of law, not men. Our story began in 2012 with Donald Trump getting the Statesman of the Year award. 4 years later, Trump won the presidency, and in 2017, Dick and Liz Cheney won Statesman and Stateswoman of the Year. Hey guys, here's a radical idea. Any chance Liz could win it twice? Now that would make history. If you would like to learn more about the Sarasota and Florida GOP, American history and political science, check out these links. And you can always watch this show and all our previous episodes on my website, Facebook, and YouTube pages. That wraps up another one. Hope you learned something and enjoyed the show. Until next time, thanks for watching. I'm Suzanne Atwell, and I'll see you around town.